All right, now let's talk about managing and return to activity. The first one, as a coach or someone to supervise the athlete, you need to think about the severity or how major the heat illness is. Next one is to rest at least 1 week. Third one is you need a doctor, specialist, physician clearance for the athlete so we are sure that that athlete can go back and play. Next would be supervising the whole procedure for return to activity protocol. So what does that mean? So what does it look like? So first we're going to go from an easy to moderate to strenuous activity, so we're not putting the athlete to a vigorous exercise right away. Next one is acclimatize, so from a cool climate controlled environment, so something that is cool towards body temperature, to something that is not really hot, but to a high temperature. Sorry. Next one is training without equipment, and then transferring that to training with equipment, as we all know that training with equipment causing the body to heat up more than without.
So the National Athletic Trainers Association goes over all the different heat illnesses and ways you can recognize it, treat it, and other strategies. So the most mild is exercise-associated muscle cramps, and this is characterized by strong painful contractions of the muscles, and they typically are less than 5 minutes, and often athletes are dehydrated and sweating. Next we have heat syncope. This is a little more intense. Athletes experience some dizziness, tunnel vision, and a decreased pulse rate. However, it may look very similar to a cardiac event, so staff must be aware of these things. So heat exhaustion, highlighted in red, are some of the characteristics that are similar to our case study mentioned previous: fatigue, faint, dizziness, and thirst. And as well as there's some other characteristics such as low blood pressure, heavy sweating, and so on. But the main difference between exertional heat exhaustion and exertional heat stroke is a core temperature that is less than 40.5 degrees Celsius. So exertional heat stroke, again, highlighted in red are some of the characteristics that were present in our case study: dizziness, collapse, hot and wet skin. And the main two diagnosing criteria for heat stroke is central nervous system dysfunction and a core body temperature that is above 40.5 degrees Celsius. So the only way to really determine if our athlete in the case study had exertional heat exhaustion or heat stroke was really to take a rectal temperature and determine whether it was above or below 40.5 degrees Celsius. So for all athletes who do have heat stroke, it is critical that they begin treatment immediately. So for muscle cramps, treatment strategies include stop exercising immediately, consume a sodium-containing beverage such as Gatorade. Heat syncope, move them to a shaded area. You can elevate their legs, and again, athletes can rehydrate. For exertional heat exhaustion, still some of the same strategies as mentioned before, but fans and ice towels can be introduced to help speed up the cooling processes. And for heat stroke, what we found in our research and what everyone recommends is that athletes do a cold water immersion up to about shoulder height. This helps to decrease core body temperature. So yeah, temperature should be between 1 to 5 degrees Celsius, and get them in the water as soon as possible. So compared to adults, children are affected with heat illnesses differently. Just due to their anatomy, they have decreased sweat glands, higher skin temperature, as well as small body sizes, and these all influence their ability to effectively evaporate, as well as other cooling mechanisms. So coaches and staff can plan training so that athletes are less likely to get heat illnesses. So for a soccer or football team, lots of times coaches can change the intensity and duration of the practice, as well as increase the rest to work ratio. Specifically for football teams, they can do practices with less equipment on, because oftentimes the equipment prevents the water from escaping and evaporating off the body and ultimately cooling the body. And this graph shows what football coaches can use to determine how much equipment they should be wearing. So in lower temperatures and lower humidity, they can be practicing in full pants, and as both temperature and humidity increase, they should be moving to light pads and then shorts only.
All right, next one is Bikram's hot yoga. So, is it okay to practice yoga in a hot and humid environment? That is the main question. So, from this study, what they found for the past findings is that there are lower stress level when you do yoga. It improves your cardiovascular endurance, your balance, deadlift strength, and so forth. And participants, there are 7 males and 13 females, and they are all healthy. Now, the main findings for this is in regards that researchers found that there is a gradual increase of heart rate from down to up from doing static movements, not even dynamic movements. Next one is that there is an excessive perspiration, so there was an insufficient way to cool down for the participants, and it's just too long. The time that they had here was 90 minutes, so usually it's only 60 minutes for a hot yoga, because the body do heat up right away. And then next one is that participants wasn't hydrating as proper as they should be. So with that in mind, they are decreasing their mindfulness. They can't concentrate properly on what they're doing, meaning they are dehydrated and they are cramping and they are feeling dizziness. Next up. All right, so what can you do if you want to teach yoga? First one, the class culture of adequate hydration. Make sure the class is hydrated. You don't want them to be dehydrated. Next one, time and space to acclimate. Make sure they have a proper procedure like what Matt said earlier. And then next one is mindful of signs of illness. So here are the couple signs and symptoms. And embrace the process of sweating. Don't be embarrassed about it.
The last thing we looked at for outside sources of how to prevent this is pre-cooling. It hasn't really had a lot of research done about it yet, but what I did look at is athletes were put into a cool chamber for about 30 minutes before even going to their activity. This was also coupled with cool water submersion, but it did show that athletes were able for 18 minutes to put off hyperventilation. And so that's something interesting to think about, and hopefully more studies will be done on it. Thank you for listening to our presentation. Now we're going to get into groups of 3, and what we're going to do is the one person is going to act out any of the different heat illnesses. Remember, there's heat syncope, heat cramps, heat exhaustion, and heat stroke. Once you've decided which one you're going to act out, then you're going to have one person come in and be your responder, whether it's a first aid responder or more like an athletic trainer. And then the final person is going to be there with a piece of paper. You need a pen and a paper, and you're going to write out what would be a good emergency action plan to help deal with whatever is unfolding in front of you. If you have any questions, hands up, and we'll come aid you in acting this out. Thanks for listening.
Bye.